All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Phil Rosengren here with BetterPitching.com, and really excited to have with us today strength coach and grip strength specialist Jedd Johnson. Jedd, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the call tonight.
Absolutely. Jedd, well, first let me just introduce you to guys. If you don't know Jedd, you're not familiar with him. He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He played baseball and pitched at Mansfield University. And more important than that, he's really one of the top guys out there when it comes to training for raw strength. He's got a lot of experience with things like strongman competitions, and even more specific than that, grip strength and forearm strength. And really, he's kind of the go-to guy when it comes to grip strength. And Jedd, just checking out your bio, you got some pretty unique feats of strength on there. Looking at things like pinching together two 45-pound plates and bending giant nails and pretty wild stuff. So maybe just talk a little bit about what that's all about, the feats of strength. Maybe give one or two of the more unique feats of strength that you've done over the years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I compete in a sport that's called grip sport, and what it is they're competitions that you're looking to test your hand, wrist, and forearm strength primarily. Now, I'm sure most of the people that are watching have probably seen strongman competitions on TV. I did that for a long time as well. I had some injuries that crept up on me, and I ended up getting out of strongman. But when I started strongman, I kind of saw that my grip was going to hold me back, just because I hadn't done a lot of dedicated grip training. So when I started strongman, I also ended up finding out about grip training and grip competition. So I said, well, this is gonna pair up very well, and I went ahead and started both. And then once the injuries came up, I have a back injury that I messed up in gym class in high school, and it finally just caught up with me after a few years of strongman competition. So I just focused on the grip stuff.
Okay.
And over the years, as that's progressed, we started putting together like standardized lifts and things like that, so that people were lifting on fairly the same pieces of equipment all over the world. I mean, this is stuff that goes on not just in the United States, but Canada. It goes on in England, Finland, Russia. It goes on all over the place. And for about 3 or 4 years, I actually held a world record in the most popular event. It just got broken. In December. So hey, records are made to be broken, man. So
Right.
so I'm just chomping at the bit in order to get the chance to do it again. But my love of strength and competition and all that all came from baseball.
Nice.
That was what I did from the time I was like 4 or 5 out in the yard with my dad. I mean, I got involved in Little League at a very early age and all that stuff. And when I wasn't playing baseball, I needed something to do. I needed something to do that was competitive, and billiards down in the basement of the dorm hall just wasn't cutting it.
Right.
So that's when I started pursuing strength much more seriously.
Good stuff. And Jedd, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here, I'm real excited to have you with us here, is because recently I've been getting more and more emails from concerned parents and pitchers out there, and it's something I wrote about in my last article on the website, that guys really want to know what they can do to keep their forearm strong and healthy and keep protect the elbow there. I know this is an area that you've got some programs out there and you know a ton about, so I definitely want to talk about that before we finish here. But first, we just wanted you to give a little more background about kind of your experience playing college ball and explain to people a little more about the training you're doing today with guys and sort of the special training you're doing there.
Yeah, I was fairly good in high school. My senior year, I was athlete of the year, something
Nice,
like
that's
that.
something. Yeah.
So I was all right. So I was recruited by a few schools, and I ended up going to a school that's pretty close nearby. It worked out real nice, Mansfield University. So that's about 45 minutes from my hometown.
That's cool. Close
So
to
it
home.
worked out great. Yeah. So I could drive there, drive back home when I needed to, and stuff like that. So I was lucky. The thing was, man, I'll tell you, I ended up. I was a pitcher, and I ended up pulling my groin on my push-off leg
Oh yeah.
and that was in the fall, right at the end of the fall season of my freshman year.
Okay.
And that injury bothered me all the way to the end of the spring semester of my sophomore year.
Hmm.
And over the course of that time, I was, I started out like going to therapy and things like that, but like there was no follow up,
Mm-hmm.
and I was basically forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
So I started wrapping it myself with this tight tape, and I don't know how I didn't end up with some kind of like blood pooling and end up with a
Oh
heart
man.
attack or
Yeesh.
something like that, because I would take these bandages, these
Uh-huh.
really heavy ace bandages, and wrap my leg so
Oh.
tight that and you know what? Aside from just the discomfort from the wrap,
Mm.
it messed my mechanics all up,
Mm.
and I screwed my elbow up. The back of my elbow
Uh-huh.
was so messed up, I literally could not set my hand down or my elbow down on a desk
Mm.
in order to just rest my head. It hurt that bad. It was
Oh man.
terrible.
That sounds awful.
And yeah, and the end of my sophomore year, I was like, my arm was beat.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't throw. I mean, if anything, my velocity reduced over
Mm-hmm.
the first couple of years. I went and told the coach I was going to come back and try out as a hitter,
Mm-hmm.
or basically wasn't going to play. And you know what? I just said, I would rather just go and lift weights. I was getting into bodybuilding and things, and I just called him up and said, sorry, coach, I'm done. I appreciate the opportunity. So it just didn't work out,
Well, it seems like
part
you
of it
found
was,
another direction that's worked out pretty well for you. So
hey, yeah, man, I have no regrets.
sometimes
I mean,
things happen for a reason.
yeah. I was never a big partier or anything. I like to get good grades and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But at the same time, when I did want to go do something, a lot of times I'd end up having to go, do something for baseball anyway. So it was
Right.
like you really couldn't get involved in a lot of stuff. So
Sure.
I ended up in a better position anyway, I think.
Nice.
And I think it's all been a good experience because it kind of motivated me to understand strength training with athletes,
Mm-hmm.
flexibility,
Sure.
mobility, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a good catalyst. I mean, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah,
So,
you got that background as an athlete and a strength coach. It kind of helps to be able to understand what they're dealing with. And I think that's really interesting what you mentioned about the groin injury affecting, ultimately affecting your mechanics and your throwing arm, because that's something I talk about a lot with guys is, everything affects everything. So your lower half is going to have an effect on your upper half, and your glove side is going to affect, your throwing arm. So I think that's a good lesson for guys that, if you got something going on with your lower half, you need to address it because ultimately that can wreck your arm. Interesting. And I want to bring it back to the forearm strength stuff because that's really the area that you're that's your area of expertise and what you know a ton about, and it's something that guys have expressed interest in. So myself having played baseball for years, I dealt with elbow injuries over the course of my career. I know a ton of guys who had Tommy John surgery. I know that rehab process involves a lot of forearm training and exercises to try to strengthen all the muscles around your elbow. But maybe talk a little bit about your approach to forearm training and that side of it that might differ from what pitchers might be used to when it comes to the approach that they might be used to.
Right. I have a family where my mother and my father both had like 5 or 6 brothers and sisters amongst them. So I have hundreds hundreds of cousins. So I get the chance to talk to them quite frequently about what they do in their training. And I'll be lucky if I find out that any of them are talked to about lower arm training at all. And most of them don't lift weights. The coaches don't have them lift or do any kind of conditioning or anything. They just have them practice and throw. But when on the rare occasion that they actually do some lower arm work, it's generally it's like the big 3: wrist roller, tennis ball squeezes, and rice bucket. Which I suppose those 3 things could be a pretty good foundation. But at the same time, you're dealing with a tremendous amount of flexion, just flexing the fingers, flexing the wrist, and it's absolutely nothing for the extensor muscles. So So there's a problem right away. You're setting yourself up for a situation where there's a tremendous amount of imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some imbalance is fine. I don't think it's going to cause a problem. But the thing is, baseball is already a sport where there's a great deal of imbalance, a great deal of unilateral activity. And to compound that with just more imbalance by focusing only on the flexion of the wrist, forearm, and hand, I think that's a big mistake. So one of the things that I always talk to people about is including more work for the back of the forearms, because that's where the extensor muscles lie. A lot of people don't think about it this way, but many of the muscles that are actually in your fingers actually come from your elbow. So there's a common flexor tendon that has a connection point for all or most of the flexor muscles on the forearm, and there's a common extensor tendon on the back of the forearm. So you're covering a lot of acreage within the forearm that you can target with some specific movements. So you can do things like rubber band extensions, which is the simplest thing ever. Everybody's got rubber bands. It costs no money basically to use rubber bands. You just loop them around your hand, and then you open your hand up against the resistance of the rubber band. And then there's some other things you can do to make that even more challenging. But that's a great start, and that's something you can do in the car ride.
Right.
You can do you can do in the dugout.
Right.
You can do as part of your warm up. I mean, it's not something that's going to weigh very heavily on your body, and it's something that you're going to need. And the thing about your body is, in most cases, the body wants to have some sort of balance between opposing muscle groups. So if you're able to maintain that balance, or if you're able to strengthen the extensor muscles as much as you can, then that means you'll have better capacity to build your flexor muscles, which is what people want anyway, because you want to be able to snap the ball very hard. You want that wrist action at the end. You want to be able to whip the bat through the zone. You need all that stuff. So that's something that a lot of people just don't think about, is just having that balance.
Cool. Yeah, it's good stuff. So let's just talk a little bit about your programs then, because you know so much about the area, and I know you've got some programs that are kind of designed even specifically for baseball players. So, talking about what you have out there, what one or two programs might you recommend for pitchers who are looking to strengthen their forearms and protect their elbow?
I'll tell you, I have a very lengthy program. I don't want to call it lengthy. It's a complete program.
Okay.
And it's called Ultimate Forearm Training for Baseball. And the image on the cover is a hitter, but the training goes very, very well for pitchers as well. And that program is really the definitive resource on grip training that is available today. There's I have my own mentors that put out tremendous products back in the day, but this product that I put out is like the ultimate resource for lower arm training. So it's not just grip strength, it's not just wrist training, it's everything from the elbow down, because that's really what grip is. I don't know how many pages or anything, but you could have so many. There's so many workouts available to you in that product that you could never get bored.
Okay.
And I show everything from specialized grip training tools that are being used to things that you can make on your own for less than $5 using just scrap stuff that's probably in your garage, or you can go to the hardware store and buy really, really cheap. So, but on top of that, I'll give you some specific stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with I call it a tube ball, but it's like you cut a hole through a ball and then you run like surgical tubing through it.
I used to have one of those growing up. In my room, I had something like that.
Yeah, and I think it was originally marketed. If I remember, I learned about it through Tom House and his programs. He was I believe he was the pitching coach for the Rangers at some point, and he worked with like Nolan Ryan and stuff like that. But I mean, he marketed these tubes for rotator cuff training. So what I did is I showed people how you can make that. I mean, it's so easy. You just take a baseball, drill through it, and then the hardest part is getting the tube to go through the hole.
Right. Yeah.
Because you got to I had to feed it through with with like a clothes hanger, But
nice.
But I show, I don't know, a few dozen exercises that you can do in order to train the hands. And it's really good if you do that because you're using your sport specific implement in order to strengthen your hands, but at the same point you're not loading the sport specific movement pattern, so you don't run the risk of hurting your mechanics, if you will.
Okay.
I don't know what the latest research is on loading the actual mechanics for pitchers, but I don't know what they're saying, if
a lot
that's
of different
bad
schools
these days.
of thought out there. Some overload,
Yeah,
underload, and
but
definitely.
yeah. So, but what I think this is most valuable for is strengthening the fingers, because in all my years of playing, I only met one kid that did any specific work for his hands in baseball. I thought the kid was crazy at the time. I thought it was just dumb because I thought you had to go and lay on the bleachers and do crunches for like 4 hours in order to get
Right.
stronger. But
it's funny.
what this kid would do is walk around with books pinched in his fingers like this, and the muscle in this finger was so hard on him from pinching. It was crazy. It was like a golf ball. But that kid's hands were so strong, and he had a curveball, dude, that would, I don't know how much it would break. I'm glad I didn't have to hit against the guy. But this kid was only maybe 5'8", and but he could throw way harder than me. Had a much better curveball, and I think a lot of it was just the fact that he was so strong, and especially in the hands and forearms.
Yeah, I mean, finger pressure has such a big role in pitches and how the ball leaves your finger, so that's interesting, especially for the curveball, because you really have to apply that pressure, with the middle finger there. So
right, and that's part of the thing that I show in my, I've got a whole section on the tube ball that, and it's just grip stuff, but changing the grips, going with a fork ball grip. Circle change grip, things like that. Part of getting used to those pitches is getting used to holding the grip.
Right.
Because I know when I first found out about like the circle change, I would throw that thing. It would end up in a tree. It would go in the back of a pickup truck.
Right. It's a tough one. It's definitely. I had the same deal learning a good change up in college. It took me forever until I finally got it down. That was another thing I talked about recently. Was just like you just said. Get the grip and. Practice holding the ball and just get comfortable with something that feels right to you, and just get real comfortable with it so you can get consistent, because that's the toughest thing. It's such a feel pitch. But that's a good point you make about you have to get used to holding the ball.
Right.
So like the exercises you're doing, you would practice it maybe with the change up grip or something like that, or
from time to time, and I show. I use a squat cage, but you could easily harness the end of the surgical tubing down on like a fence, for instance, and you can do all kinds of drills, and you're just manipulating your hand. So the thing is, you get done with your bullpen or your long toss or something like that, then you can go over and do some of these manipulations with the tube ball, and you strengthen that hand up. You do that afterwards, you'll be recovered perfectly fine by the next time you have to throw. So. In my, I had my oldest cousins that were playing baseball 2 years ago come over and do this stuff, and they said it made a huge difference in just being able to, I don't know if it really changed their velocity, but it just they said it felt like that they could just put the ball wherever they wanted to because they had such better command. And seeing these guys train, they were weak. And I just ran them through basic strengthening stuff, and it made a huge difference. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, definitely good stuff. I'll be sure and link up everything below here on the website so people can find everything. But just so they can hear, where would you send guys? What website would you send guys to learn more information about yourself, your programs, and the kind of strength training you do?
Yeah, my main website is dieselcrew.com. Diesel just like the fuel, crew.com, and that's my personal website. I touch on grip strength very heavily, but that's not at all everything that I do. All strength training, athletic strength training. I touch on soft tissue care, and that's another thing real quick that we didn't talk about is the recovery aspect. How to recover from a sore arm, from pain in your elbow. I cover all different kinds of things that you can do on your own in order to speed up that recovery process.
Okay.
But we were talking about the website, man. Yeah, definitely dieselcrew.com. I think it's a great place for people to go and get started. And I've got a free a double report giveaway that
Okay.
pops up right up on the site. Just throw your email in there; it'll come right to you, and it talks about quick wins for strength training and quick wins for grip training, and I'm convinced they're going to help out a lot of guys. I think strength training and that kind of preparation for baseball players is a little it's a little lacking. The
Mm.
information, a lot of it's passed down from generation to generation and
Yeah,
never
it
changes.
tends to be the way it
So
goes with baseball more than a lot of other
yeah,
sports, even. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I invite people to check that out. I did have a baseball blog, man, but I just I couldn't keep up with it.
Kind of
So,
phase it out.
but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I leave
All
that to
right,
other
cool.
guys like yourself that are much more involved in the sport and still get into it. Because the most I do is I watch a few games every year. I watch
Yeah.
I watch the Yankees, man.
Yeah, well,
I'm,
it'll be
I'm a
interesting this
Yankees
year.
fan.
I grew up
Yeah,
not too far from New York City myself, so that was always my team growing up too. So, I
yeah,
can relate to you on that for sure.
yeah, man.
Good stuff. All right,
Cool.
man. Hey, Jed, really appreciate you taking the time. It's been awesome, and thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Yep. Thanks. I appreciate you reaching out to me, buddy.
All right, man. Be good.
See ya.